Admiral Kethver stood before the massive viewing window of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The stars stretched endlessly before him, each one a reminder of the Zephyrian Empire's vast power. For 3,000 years his people had ruled this galaxy. 3,000 years of perfect order, calculated conquest, and technological superiority. The bridge around him hummed with quiet efficiency. His officers worked at their stations with the precision that made the Zephyrian military fear to cross. Hundreds of worlds. Everything was as it should be. Everything was under control. "Admiral," came the voice of his intelligence officer, Commander Thexani. "We have received the monthly tribute reports." Kethver turned from the window. His tall, slender frame moved with the grace that all Zephyrians possessed. His skin had the pale blue tint of his species, and his large dars reflected the cold intelligence that had made him the Empire's most successful commander. "Proceed with your report," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been questioned. Thexani activated a holographic display that filled the center of the bridge. Star systems appeared in the air, each one marked with symbols showing their status within the Empire. Green lights indicated full compliance with tribute demands. Yellow showed minor delays. Red meant rebellion. There were very few red lights. The Empire had learned long ago how to deal with rebellion. "The Vorthan sector has increased their metal production by 12%, Thexani reported. "The mining. Worlds in the Kelton system are ahead of schedule. The agricultural planets continue to provide sufficient food supplies for our core worlds." Kethver nodded. It was all exactly as expected. The Empire had perfected the art of ruling other species. They provided protection and advanced technology in exchange for resources and loyalty. Most species found this arrangement acceptable. Those who did not quickly learned the price of defiance. "Any notable issues?" the Admiral asked. "Only minor piracy in the Outer Rim territories," Thexani replied. 3 merchant vessels reported attacks last month. The perpetrators were caught and dealt with appropriately. Kethver knew what that meant. Zephyrian justice was swift and final. Pirates who dared to attack Imperial vessels simply disappeared. Their ships were destroyed, their crews executed, and their homeworlds received clear messages about the consequences of harboring criminals. "And what of our expansion efforts?" Kethver asked. Another officer, Captain Zexther, stepped forward. He controlled the Empire's expansion fleets, the massive armadas that brought new worlds under Zephyrian control. "We have identified 17 new systems suitable for incorporation," Zexther reported. 12 contain primitive species that should submit without resistance. 3 have more advanced civilizations that may require demonstration of our power. 2 appear to be uninhabited but rich in valuable resources. "Excellent," Kethver said. This was how the Empire grew. Slowly, methodically, always ensuring that each new addition strengthened the whole. They never expanded too quickly or took unnecessary risks. Patience and planning had built their galactic dominion. "There's one more matter, Admiral," Thexani sighed, hesitation creeping into her voice. Kethver raised an eyebrow. His officers rarely showed uncertainty. "Speak." "Our scouts have encountered a new species in the Outer Rim. They call themselves humans." The Admiral waited for more information. New species were discovered regularly as the Empire expanded. Most followed predictable patterns. "What do we know about them?" he asked. Thexani manipulated the holographic display. A new star system appeared, showing a yellow star with several planets orbiting it. One planet was highlighted in blue. "Their home system is designated Sol 3 by our navigation systems," she began. "They call their homeworld Earth. Initial scans suggest a population of approximately 8 billion individuals." 8 billion? Kethver was mildly impressed. "That was a substantial population for a single world." "Yes, Admiral." "They appear to have achieved limited space travel. Our scouts detected several small outposts in their system and some basic mining operations on nearby worlds." This all sounded perfectly normal to Kethver. Another species that had learned to travel between planets in their own system but had not yet developed faster than light travel. The Empire encountered such civilizations regularly. What is their technology level? He asked. Primitive, Zexler answered. They still use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft. Their weapons appear to be based on kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. We detected no plasma technology, no particle beam weapons, and no energy shields. Kethver almost smiled. Kinetic weapons and chemical explosives were what primitive species always used. They threw pieces of metal at each other and used controlled explosions to cause damage. It was crude and inefficient compared to the elegant plasma technology the Empire had perfected. Have they detected our scouts? The Admiral asked. We believe. So, Vexani replied, but they made no attempt to communicate or approach our vessels. They seem to be aware that someone is watching them, but they have not tried to make contact. This was also typical. Primitive species usually became nervous when they realized they were not alone in the galaxy. Some tried to hide. Others attempted to communicate. A few foolishly tried to attack scout ships with their inadequate weapons. What is your assessment of their military capabilities? Kethver asked Zexler. The captain consulted his datapad. Minimal threat, Admiral. They have numerous small conflicts on their homeworld, which suggests they are fractured into competing groups. Their largest military vessels are approximately 200 meters in length. Our smallest patrol ships are larger than their biggest warships. And their industrial capacity? Substantial for a primitive species, Zexler admitted. They appear to have extensive manufacturing capabilities and significant resource extraction operations. However, all of this is focused on their crude technology. Kethver processed this information. The humans sounded like a typical pre-contact species. Large population, decent industrial base, but completely inferior technology. They would make a useful addition to the Empire once they understood their place in the galactic order. Recommendation? He asked. Standard subjugation protocol, Zexler replied without hesitation. A fleet of 12 vessels should be sufficient to demonstrate our superiority. Once they see our technology, they will understand the futility of resistance, the Admiral nodded. 12 ships was the standard force used for incorporating new species. It was large enough to impress, but not so massive as to appear threatening. The Empire had learned that overwhelming displays of force sometimes caused primitive species to fight desperately rather than surrender logically. Very well, Kethver decided. Prepare a subjugation fleet. Standard composition. Include translation, equipment, and cultural analysis teams. I want this to proceed smoothly. Will you be commanding the fleet personally, Admiral? Vexani asked. Kethver considered this briefly. He had personally led many subjugation missions early in his career, but the humans did not seem to present any unusual challenges. Their technology was centuries behind Zephyrian capabilities. Their military was obviously weak and divided. It would be a routine operation. No, he decided. Captain Valethus can command this mission. It will be good experience for him. Captain Valethus was young for a fleet commander, but he had shown promise in previous operations. Leading the subjugation of the humans would help prepare him for more challenging assignments in the future. Understood, Admiral, Zexler replied. When should the fleet depart? Within the week, Kethver said. I want the humans incorporated into the Empire before the next council meeting. It will be a good demonstration of our continued expansion. The officers nodded and began making preparations. Kethver turned back to the viewing window, watching the stars that represented his Empire's domain. Soon there would be one more system under Zephyrian control. One more species contributing to the Empire's strength. He thought about the humans. Briefly, 8 billion individuals was a significant population. Their industrial capabilities could be quite useful once properly directed. And every new species brought fresh perspectives and capabilities to the Empire, even if they needed extensive education about galactic civilization. The Empire had a standard process for integrating new species. First came the demonstration of superior technology, then negotiations about tribute and protection. Finally, the gradual introduction of advanced Zephyrian technology and the establishment of imperial governors to ensure compliance. Some species adapted quickly to imperial rule. Others took longer to understand the benefits of membership in a galactic civilization, but they all eventually learned. The Empire was patient and thorough in its methods. Kethver had personally overseen the incorporation of dozens of species. During his long career, he had seen primitive civilizations transform into productive members of galactic society. It was one of the Empire's greatest achievements, bringing order and advancement to species that would otherwise remain trapped in their primitive ways. The humans would be no different. Within a few years, they would be contributing resources and labor to the Empire while benefiting from advanced technology and protection from the many dangers of galactic space. Their children would grow up as citizens of the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. "Admiral," Mixani said, interrupting his thoughts, "Captain Veilthus requests permission to review the human intelligence files before departure." "Granted," Kethver replied. "Make sure he understands that this is a standard operation. No unnecessary risks, no deviations from established protocol?" "Yes, Admiral." Kethver remained at the window as his officers continued their preparations. In the distance he could see other ships of the Imperial fleet, massive vessels that represented the peak of Zephyrian engineering and military power. Each ship was a work of art as well as a weapon of war, with smooth curves and elegant lines that spoke of advanced civilization. The Empire's fleets had never known defeat. Not once in 3,000 years had a primitive species successfully resisted Imperial expansion. The combination of superior technology, tactical brilliance, and overwhelming numbers had proven unstoppable against every enemy they had encountered. The humans would soon learn what countless other species had learned before them. Resistance was futile when faced with the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Cooperation brought prosperity and advancement. Defiance brought only destruction. It was a simple choice, and Admiral Kethver was confident the humans would make the right decision once they understood their situation. After all, they were an intelligent species. They had achieved space travel and built a substantial civilization on their homeworld. Surely they would recognize the benefits of joining the galactic community under Imperial protection. The subjugation of Earth would be completed within days of the fleet's arrival. The humans would submit, as they all did, and the Empire would grow stronger once again. Captain Veilthus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Swift Justice, as his fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human star system. 12 Zephyrian vessels materialized in perfect formation, their elegant hulls gleaming in the light of the yellow star the humans called Sol. "All ships report ready status, Captain," his communications officer announced. "Fleet formation is stable. All weapons and defensive systems are operating normally." Veilthus nodded with satisfaction. This was his first independent command of a subjugation fleet, and everything was proceeding exactly according to Imperial protocol. The fleet consisted of 2 heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 6 patrol vessels. More than enough firepower to deal with any primitive species. "Begin sensor sweeps," he ordered. "I want a complete picture of human military capabilities before we announce our presence." The tactical officer worked at his station, analyzing the data flowing in from the fleet's advanced sensors. After several minutes, he looked up with a puzzled expression. "Captain, I am detecting some unusual readings." "Explain," Veilthus said, moving to stand behind the tactical station. "The humans appear to have more orbital installations than our initial intelligence suggested. I count at least 47 artificial objects in orbit around their homeworld. Most appear to be civilian stations, but several have unusual energy signatures." Veilthus studied the tactical display. The orbital installations looked crude compared to Zephyrian technology, but there were more of them than expected. Perhaps the humans were more industrious than first thought. "What about their military vessels?" he asked. "I detect approximately 30 ships of various sizes throughout the system. The largest are still under 300 meters in length. All appear to be using chemical propulsion systems. No plasma drives detected." This was more ships than intelligence had predicted, but they were still primitively small and slow. A single Zephyrion destroyer could probably handle the entire human fleet without difficulty. "Any signs that they have detected our arrival?" Valthus asked. "Unknown, Captain. Their communication systems are quite active, but we cannot determine if this is normal traffic or a response to our presence." Valthus considered his options. Imperial protocol called for immediate contact with new species. The demonstration of superior technology usually convinced primitive civilizations to surrender without violence. In his experience, most species became properly respectful once they saw what they were dealing with. "Open a communication channel to the human homeworld," he ordered. "Use their most common language. Make sure the translation matrix is set to convey proper authority." The communications officer worked for several minutes, adjusting frequencies and language protocols. Finally, he nodded to the captain. "Channel open, sir. Broadcasting on multiple frequencies to ensure reception." Valthus activated the recording system and stood straight, projecting the dignity and power of the Zephyrian Empire. His image would be transmitted to the human world along with his words. "Attention, inhabitants of the world you call Earth," he began, his voice carrying the tone of absolute authority he had practiced for years. "I am Captain Valthus of the Zephyrian Empire. We represent the dominant civilization of this galaxy, and the rightful rulers of all inhabited worlds." He paused, allowing the translation system to convert his words into the human language. The effect was usually quite impressive when primitive species received their first communication from an advanced galactic civilization. "Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for incorporation into our empire," he continued. "This is a great honor that will bring your people protection, advanced technology, and membership in galactic civilization." Another pause. Valthus had delivered this speech dozens of times to various species. The wording had been carefully crafted by imperial psychologists to sound both impressive and reassuring. However, membership in our empire requires acknowledgement of imperial authority and payment of appropriate tribute. You will submit your industrial and military assets to imperial control. You will provide resources as directed by imperial governors. In return, you will receive protection from the dangers of galactic space and access to technology far beyond your current capabilities. Valthus gestured to his tactical officer, who activated a display showing the Imperial fleet's formation. The images would be transmitted along with his words, demonstrating the power backing up his demands. "To show our technological superiority and peaceful intentions, we will now demonstrate our weapons on an uninhabited target in your system. This is not an attack, but a display of the power that protects all Imperial citizens." He nodded to his weapons officer. "Target the human moon. Minimal power setting. We want to create a visible impact without causing significant damage." The weapons officer began charging the plasma cannons. A low-power burst would create a spectacular light show on the lunar surface that would be easily visible from Earth. It was an effective demonstration that never failed to impress primitive species. "You have one standard day to respond with. Your surrender," Valthus concluded his transmission. "Comply with Imperial demands, and your people will prosper under our protection. Resist and face the consequences of defying galactic law." The transmission ended. Now came the waiting period. Most species responded within hours once they understood their situation. Some tried to negotiate, which was acceptable as long as they ultimately submitted. A few made threats, which were usually abandoned once they realized the futility of their position. "Captain," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a response." Valthus was pleased. A quick response usually indicated a practical species that understood the benefits of cooperation. "Put it through." The main display activated, showing a human face. The creature appeared to be middle-aged by its species standards, with dark skin and intelligent eyes. More importantly, it was wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. "This is Admiral Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said in a calm, steady voice. "You have entered our solar system without permission and made threats against our world." Valthus frowned. The human's tone was not what he expected. There was no fear, no awe at contact with an advanced alien civilization, just cold professionalism. "We do not recognize your authority over this system or any other," Admiral Rodriguez continued. "You have 30 minutes to leave our space. This is your only warning." The transmission ended abruptly. Veilthus stared at the blank screen in amazement. No species had ever responded to first contact with such immediate defiance. Usually there were questions about Imperial technology, attempts to negotiate terms, or pleas for mercy. Never had anyone simply told an Imperial fleet to leave. "Captain," his tactical officer said, "should we proceed with the demonstration?" Veilthus almost laughed at the human's response. 30 minutes to leave? The arrogance was astounding. These primitives apparently did not understand what they were dealing with. Yes, he decided. Proceed with the lunar bombardment. Once they see our power, they will abandon this foolish posturing. The weapons officer completed his targeting calculations. "Plasma cannons charged and ready, Captain. Targeting the lunar surface coordinates." "Fire!" Veilthus ordered. The Swift Justice's main plasma cannon discharged a brilliant beam of energy toward the human moon. The bolt of superheated matter streaked across space at near-light speed, clearly visible to anyone watching from Earth. But the bolt never reached its target. "Captain!" The tactical officer shouted, his voice filled with alarm. "Something intercepted our plasma beam." Veilthus rushed to the tactical station. "What do you mean intercepted?" "The plasma discharge was neutralized approximately 50,000 kilometers from the lunar surface. Energy readings suggest some kind of directed energy weapon." "That's impossible," Veilthus said. "Our sensors detected no human weapons capable of affecting plasma at that range." "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system." "Something is powering up." The tactical display updated rapidly as new contacts appeared across the system. What had seemed like small mining vessels and civilian stations suddenly showed completely different energy profiles. The readings were unlike anything in Zephyrian databases. "Captain," the communications officer said, his voice tight with worry, "we're receiving another transmission from the humans." "Put it through," Veilthus ordered, though his confidence was beginning to waver. The display showed a different human this time. A woman with short hair and cold eyes, wearing a military uniform with more decorations than the previous speaker. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth ship Reaper," she said, her voice carrying an edge that made Veilthus uncomfortable. "You were warned to leave our system. You chose to attack one of our worlds instead." "Attack?" Veilthus protested. "That was merely a demonstration. You fired weapons in our system," Captain Chun replied. "Against our territory, without our permission. That makes you an enemy combatant." She leaned forward slightly, and Veilthus saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Not fear, not awe, not even anger. It was something colder and more dangerous. "You wanted to demonstrate your power," she continued. "Now we'll demonstrate ours. You should have left when you had the chance." The transmission ended. Veilthus stood frozen for a moment, processing what he had just heard. The human's tone suggested they actually intended to fight. Fight against a Zephyrian Imperial fleet with their primitive technology. "Captain," his sensor operator said, voice rising with panic, "massive contact bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance approximately 1 million kilometers and closing fast." "How fast?" Veilthus demanded. "Sir, it's moving at 0.7 light speed. That's impossible for chemical propulsion." Veilthus stared at the tactical display as a new contact appeared. The signature was enormous, dwarfing anything in his fleet. As it approached, his sensors began providing more detailed information. The vessel was massive, nearly 2 kilometers in length. But unlike the graceful curves of Zephyrian ships, this thing looked like it had been built for war and nothing else. Angular armor plating covered its hull. Weapon ports dotted its surface like mechanical eyes. Energy readings showed power levels that shouldn't be possible for a species using primitive technology. "All ships," Veilthus ordered, trying to keep his voice steady, "assume defensive formation." Charge all weapons and raise energy shields. His fleet moved into standard Imperial battle formation, elegant ships positioning themselves with practiced precision. Their plasma weapons began charging, and their energy shields activated, creating shimmering barriers around each vessel. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "the human vessel has stopped at 800,000 kilometers. It appears to be scanning us." "What kind of weapons are they mounting?" Valthus asked. "Unknown, sir. The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases." "I'm detecting what appear to be magnetic acceleration systems and some kind of missile launchers, but the power levels are far higher than anything we've seen from primitive species." Valthus opened a communication channel to his fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Valthus. We are facing an unknown threat level. Follow standard engagement protocols, but be prepared for unexpected capabilities." He then activated the emergency beacon that would alert Admiral Kethver to potential problems. The Admiral needed to know that the humans were not the primitive species they had appeared to be. "Captain," the communications officer said, receiving transmission from the human vessel. Captain Chian's face appeared on the screen again. Behind her, Valthus could see what appeared to be a military command center filled with humans working at various stations. Their equipment looked different from anything he had seen before, but it was clearly advanced technology. "Final warning," she said simply. "Leave now or we will remove you." Valthus felt anger rising above his confusion and growing fear. No primitive species spoke to the Imperial Navy this way. Whatever technology these humans possessed, they were still just one ship against 12. "Human," he said, putting all his authority into his voice, "you are facing the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Surrender now, and we may show mercy for your ignorance." Captain Chian's expression didn't change. "You had your chance," she said. "Now you get to learn why humans don't give second warnings." The transmission ended, and alarms began screaming throughout the Swift Justice as the human ship opened fire. The UES Reaper opened fire with a sound that Captain Valthus had never heard before. Not the clean hum of plasma weapons or the whistle of particle beams, but a deep, mechanical roar that seemed to shake space itself. "Incoming projectiles," his tactical officer screamed. "Multiple contacts, high velocity." Valthus watched in horror as the tactical display showed dozens of objects racing toward his fleet. But these were not energy beams or plasma bolts. They were solid projectiles, moving at speeds that defied everything he knew about kinetic weapons. "Impossible," he whispered. "No kinetic weapon can achieve those velocities." The first projectile struck the destroyer Glorious Victory. Valthus expected to see the ship's energy shields absorb the impact, as they had done countless times against primitive weapons. Instead, the projectile punched straight through the shield as if it did not exist. The metal slug, no larger than a ground vehicle, hit the destroyer's hull at 90% of light speed. The impact released more energy than a plasma cannon. The elegant Zephyria ship simply vanished in a ball of white-hot plasma and expanding debris. "Shields are ineffective," the tactical officer reported, his voice breaking with panic. "The projectiles are moving too fast for our defensive systems to track." More projectiles slammed into the fleet. The cruiser Eternal Wisdom took 3 hits in rapid succession. Its armor, designed to withstand plasma bombardment, crumpled like paper under the relativistic impacts. The ship broke apart, its crew dying instantly as atmosphere and structure were torn away. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Valthus ordered. "Maximum acceleration, get us out of range." But the human ship was not finished. As the Zephyrian vessels began to flee, the Reaper launched a second wave of weapons. These were larger objects that moved more slowly than the kinetic projectiles, but still faster than anything in the Imperial arsenal. "Missile contacts," the sensor operator called out. 12 inbound, estimated impact in 40 seconds. Valthus watched the tactical display as the missiles approached his scattered fleet. His ships were firing their point defense weapons, trying to shoot down the incoming threats. Several missiles were destroyed, but others adapted their flight paths with impossible agility. The patrol vessel, Quick Strike, was the first to be hit by a missile. The explosion was unlike anything Veilthus had ever seen. Instead of the focused destruction of plasma weapons, this was raw, primitive violence. A nuclear fireball expanded from the impact point, vaporizing the small ship and sending electromagnetic pulses racing through space. Nuclear weapons, his science officer said in shock. They're using nuclear explosives. Veilthus could barely process what he was seeing. Nuclear weapons had been banned by galactic civilization for over 2,000 years. They were considered too destructive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to use in civilized warfare. Only the most primitive and barbaric species still employed such crude devices, but the humans were using them with devastating effectiveness. Another missile struck the destroyer Swift Arrow, and the nuclear explosion tore the ship in half. The crew had no time to escape before their vessel became an expanding cloud of radioactive debris. "Captain," his communications officer said, "we're receiving damage reports from all ships. 3 vessels destroyed, 4 heavily damaged. Our formation is completely broken." Veilthus stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than 5 minutes, the humans had destroyed or crippled more than half his fleet. Ships that had served the Empire for decades were gone, reduced to glowing wreckage by weapons that should not have been able to harm them. "Return fire," he ordered desperately. "All ships, target the human vessel. Maximum power." The remaining Zephyrian ships turned their plasma cannons toward the Reaper. Brilliant beams of superheated matter lanced across space, each one carrying enough energy to level a city. The beams struck the human ship's hull with perfect accuracy and accomplished nothing. "Our weapons are having no effect," the tactical officer reported. "The human ship appears to have some kind of armor that dissipates plasma energy." Veilthus watched in growing horror as the human vessel continued its attack. More kinetic projectiles streaked from its weapons, and more of his ships died. The destroyer Bold Justice was hit by 3 projectiles simultaneously and broke apart like a child's toy, but it was not just the weapons that terrified him. It was the way the humans fought. Zephyrian warfare was precise, calculated, elegant. Ships maneuvered in careful formations, using their superior technology to achieve clean victories with minimal casualties. The humans fought like animals. Their ship moved with brutal efficiency, positioning itself to maximize damage while ignoring the established rules of galactic combat. They showed no mercy, offered no opportunity for surrender, and seemed determined to destroy every Zephyrian vessel in the system. "Captain," his tactical officer said, "the human ship is accelerating toward us. They appear to be preparing for a close-range engagement." Close range? Veilthus could not understand why anyone would want to fight at close range in space combat. Long-range precision was the key to civilized warfare. Only barbarians engaged in close combat. The Reaper closed the distance with frightening speed. As it approached, Veilthus could see the ship's design more clearly. Where Zephyrian vessels were built for beauty as well as function, the human ship was purely functional. Every surface was covered with armor plating, weapon mounts, or sensor arrays. It looked like a machine built for killing and nothing else. "All ships," Veilthus ordered, "concentrate fire on the approaching vessel. Everything we have." The remaining ships of his fleet poured their plasma fire into the human ship. The space around the Reaper filled with brilliant energy as dozens of weapons struck its hull. For a moment, Veilthus dared to hope that their concentrated fire might be effective. Then the human ship emerged from the plasma storm, completely undamaged. "Impossible," he whispered. "Nothing can withstand that much plasma bombardment." The Reaper was now close enough for its secondary weapons to engage. Suddenly, space around the Zephyrian fleet filled with streams of energy unlike anything they had encountered. These were not plasma beams or particle weapons, but something else entirely. "Laser weapons," his science officer reported. "Focused light amplification. Primitive technology, but they're using power levels far beyond normal parameters." The laser beams swept across the fleet like searchlights of death. Where they touched Zephyrian ships, armor melted and hull plating vaporized. The patrol vessel Night Hunter was cut in half by a sustained laser burst, its crew compartments exposed to space. But the lasers were just the beginning. As the Reaper closed to point-blank range, it deployed weapons that made Veilthus question everything he thought he knew about warfare. Small objects separated from the human ship and accelerated toward the Zephyrian vessels. At first, Veilthus thought they were more missiles. Then he realized they were moving under their own power and changing direction with intelligent purpose. Autonomous weapons, his tactical officer said. They appear to be self-guided. The robot weapons swarmed around the Zephyrian ships like angry insects. Each one was small enough to avoid point defense fire, but they carried enough explosive power to damage critical systems. They attached themselves to hull plating and detonated, punching holes in armor and destroying sensor arrays. The cruiser Righteous Fury was overwhelmed by a swarm of the robot weapons. Dozens of small explosions rippled across its hull, disabling weapons, destroying engines, and breaching the crew compartments. The mighty warship was reduced to a drifting hulk in minutes. "Captain," his communications officer said, "the Righteous Fury is requesting permission to surrender." Veilthus opened his mouth to give the order, then stopped. In 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, no Zephyrian ship had ever surrendered to a primitive species. The very idea was unthinkable, but what choice did they have? The humans had already destroyed most of his fleet with weapons that should not have been possible. Their technology was beyond anything in Imperial databases, and their tactics were completely alien to civilized warfare. "Open a channel to the human ship," he ordered. Captain Sheen's face appeared on the display. Behind her, Veilthus could see human crew members working at their stations with calm efficiency. They did not look like primitives who had just achieved their first victory against an advanced civilization. They looked like experienced warriors who were simply doing their job. "We surrender," Veilthus said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "Please show mercy to my surviving crews." Captain Chun studied him for a long moment. Her expression showed no emotion, no satisfaction at her victory, no anger at the invasion of her system, just cold professionalism. "Your surrender is not accepted," she said finally. Veilthus felt his heart stop. "What do you mean?" "You came to our system with the intent to conquer our world," Chun replied. "You threatened our people and fired weapons in our space. There are consequences for such actions, but we offer surrender." Veilthus protested. "Civilized species accept surrender." Something flickered in Chin's eyes. It might have been amusement, but there was no warmth in it. "Civilized," she repeated. "You come to enslave an entire species and call yourself civilized. You threaten to destroy our world and expect mercy when you lose." She leaned forward slightly, and Veilthus saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. "Let me explain something about humans," she said quietly. "We don't fight civilized. Wars, we fight to win. And when someone threatens our home, our families, our children, we don't stop until the threat is eliminated." "Please," Veilthus begged. "My crews are innocent. They were following orders." "Your crews chose to follow those orders," Chun replied. "They chose to come here with weapons and threats. Now they face the consequences of that choice." The transmission ended. Veilthus stared at the blank screen, understanding for the first time that he was about to die. Not in honorable combat between civilized species, but as prey being hunted by predators who had no concept of mercy. "All ships," he ordered, his voice hollow. "Prepare for ramming speed. If we must die, let us die with honor." But even that final gesture was denied to him. The Reaper's weapon systems tracked every movement of the surviving Zephyrian ships. Kinetic projectiles and missiles eliminated the remaining vessels one by one. With clinical precision that left no room for heroic last stands, the Swift Justice was the last ship to die. As the final kinetic projectile approached, Veilthus activated his personal recorder. "This is Captain Veilthus of the Imperial Navy," he said quickly. "We encountered the species called humans in the Sol system. They are not primitive. They are not civilized. They are something else entirely, something dangerous. The projectile struck his ship, and Captain Valethus died without ever understanding what had hit him. In the aftermath of the battle, the Reaper moved through the debris field, its sensors scanning for survivors. There were none. The entire Zephyrian fleet had been obliterated in less than 30 minutes. Captain Chun stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display that showed only debris where 12 Imperial warships had been. Her crew worked quietly around her, already preparing for the next phase of operations. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command." "Put it through," Chun ordered. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the screen. "Status report, Captain." "Hostile fleet eliminated," Chun replied. "0 friendly casualties. We are beginning salvage operations to recover alien technology for analysis." "Understood," Rodriguez said. "Intelligence reports that this was likely a scouting force. We should expect a larger fleet once they realize what happened here." Chun nodded. "My ship and crew are ready for whatever comes next, sir." "I know you are, Captain." The Reaper and her sisters were built for this kind of work. The transmission ended, and Chun returned her attention to the debris field. Somewhere in that wreckage was technology that could help humanity prepare for the war that was surely coming. Because if there was one thing humans had learned from their own violent history, it was that showing strength to bullies only made them bring bigger friends. The galaxy thought it understood war. Soon it would learn how wrong it had been. Admiral Kethver stood in the emergency briefing room aboard the Eternal Dominion, staring at the holographic display that showed the complete destruction of Captain Valethus and his fleet. The recordings had arrived 3 days ago via emergency. Beacon and Kethver had watched them dozens of times, trying to understand what had happened. "This is impossible," he said for the 20th time. 12 Imperial warships cannot be destroyed by a single primitive vessel. Commander Thexani, his intelligence officer, manipulated the holographic controls. "The sensor recordings are clear, Admiral. The human ship used kinetic weapons moving at relativistic speeds, nuclear missiles, and some form of energy-resistant armor that our plasma weapons could not penetrate." "Nuclear weapons," Kethver repeated, disgust clear in his voice. "Barbaric explosives that no civilized species has used for millennia. And you tell me these primitives defeated our ships with such crude devices?" "The recordings suggest their technology is far more advanced than our initial intelligence indicated," Thexani replied carefully. "The kinetic weapons alone represent engineering capabilities that exceed our current understanding?" Kethver waved his hand dismissively. "Enhanced technology or not, they are still primitives. 1 ship against 12. It was likely an ambush, or perhaps they had hidden weapons platforms throughout their system." Captain Zexther, who commanded the Empire's expansion fleet, stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, the tactical recordings show no evidence of additional weapons platforms. The single human vessel appeared to engage our fleet alone." "Then Valethus was incompetent," Kethver snapped. "1 ship cannot defeat 12, regardless of technology. He must have made critical errors in his command decisions." The room fell silent. Everyone present knew that Captain Valethus had been a competent officer who had successfully completed several previous subjugation missions. But admitting that a primitive species had legitimately defeated an Imperial fleet was unthinkable. "What is our response?" Zexther asked finally. Kethver turned to face the tactical display showing the human star system. His pride, his reputation, and the Empire's entire expansion doctrine were at stake. No primitive species could be allowed to defeat Imperial forces without consequences. "We will assemble the 3rd battle group," he decided. 50 ships, including my flagship. I will personally lead this mission to ensure there are no further failures." Thexani looked concerned. "Admiral, perhaps we should study the human technology more carefully before committing such a large force. If they have capabilities we do not understand—" "They destroyed 12 ships," Kethver interrupted. 50 ships will be more than adequate to deal with whatever surprises they may have. Even if they have a dozen vessels like the one that destroyed Valethus, We will overwhelm them with superior numbers and tactics. Yes, Admiral, Vixani replied, though her expression remained worried. 3 weeks later, Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion as the largest Zephyrian fleet ever assembled for a subjugation. Mission dropped out of faster than light. Travel at the edge of the Sol system. 50 warships materialized in perfect formation, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire planets. All ships report ready status, his communications officer announced. Fleet formation is optimal. All weapons and defensive systems are fully operational. Kethver nodded with satisfaction. This time there would be no surprises. The humans might have destroyed Vaelthus through trickery or luck, but they could not stand against the full might of an Imperial battle group. Begin sensor sweeps, he ordered. I want to know the location of every human vessel in this system. The tactical officer worked at his station, analyzing the incoming data. After several minutes, he looked up with an expression of confusion and concern. Admiral, I am detecting multiple large contacts throughout the system. The human fleet appears to be significantly larger than our intelligence suggested. How many ships? Kethver asked. Preliminary count shows at least 15 vessels over 1 kilometer in length. Multiple smaller craft are also present. Total count is approximately 40 ships. Kethver frowned. 40 ships was more than expected, but still manageable. His fleet was larger and included several dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the humans could field. What about the vessel that destroyed Vaelthus? He asked. The Reaper is present, Admiral. It appears to be part of a larger formation that includes 11 other ships of similar design. 12 ships like the Reaper. That was concerning, but Kethver's fleet still held a significant numerical advantage. And now that they knew what to expect, they could adapt their tactics accordingly. Open a communication channel to the human home world, he ordered. I want to speak directly with their leaders. The communication system worked for several minutes before establishing contact. The main display activated, showing the same human admiral who had appeared in Vaelthus' recordings. This is Admiral Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force. The human said. You have returned to our system after your previous fleet was destroyed. That suggests either courage or stupidity. Kethver drew himself up to his full height, projecting the authority and power of the Zephyrian Empire. I am Admiral Kethver, Supreme Commander of the 3rd Battle Group. Your barbaric attack on our previous fleet was an act of war against the Empire. You will surrender immediately or face complete annihilation. Admiral Rodriguez studied him for a moment. You came to our system to enslave our species, and you call us barbaric when we defend ourselves. Interesting perspective. You destroyed Imperial vessels using forbiddance weapons, Kethver replied. Nuclear explosives and kinetic bombardment are banned by galactic law. Your actions mark you as criminals and terrorists. Something that might have been amusement flickered across the human's face. Galactic law? Made by whom? For whose benefit? We never agreed to your laws, Admiral. And we certainly didn't agree to become your slaves. All intelligent species must follow galactic law, Kethver insisted. The Empire brings order and civilization to primitive worlds. Resistance only brings suffering. Then you can take your order and civilization and leave our system, Rodriguez replied. You have 30 minutes. The transmission ended abruptly. Kethver stared at the blank screen in disbelief. The humans were still defying the Empire, even when faced with 50 warships. Their arrogance was beyond comprehension. Admiral, his tactical officer said, multiple human ships are moving to intercept our fleet. They appear to be forming a battle line. Kethver turned to the tactical display. The human fleet was indeed maneuvering into combat formation. But instead of the defensive positioning he expected, they were advancing aggressively toward his much larger force. They intend to attack us, he said, amazement clear in his voice. 40 ships against 50, and they choose to attack rather than defend. Orders, Admiral. Zexther asked. Kethver considered his options. The humans had shown they possessed dangerous technology, but they were still outnumbered. A decisive victory here would restore Imperial prestige and demonstrate the consequences of resisting galactic law. All ships assume battle formation, he ordered. Prepare for standard engagement. We will destroy their fleet and then bombard their world until they surrender unconditionally. The Imperial fleet moved into its traditional formation, with the heaviest ships in the center and smaller vessels protecting the flanks. It was a formation that had brought victory in hundreds of battles across the galaxy. The human fleet approached. In a completely different configuration, instead of maintaining careful distances and organized lines, their ships were clustered together in what looked like a disorganized mob. To Kethver's trained eye, it appeared chaotic and unprofessional. Human. Fleet in range, Admiral, his weapons officer reported. All ships, open fire, Kethver commanded. 50 Imperial warships fired simultaneously. Hundreds of plasma beams lanced across space, each one capable of destroying a city. The concentrated firepower should have vaporized the human fleet in the opening salvo. Instead, the humans did something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They charged. The human ships accelerated directly into the plasma bombardment, their strange armor absorbing or deflecting energy that should have destroyed them. As they closed the distance, they opened fire with their own weapons. The space between the two fleets filled with kinetic projectiles moving at impossible speeds. Nuclear missiles streaked through the darkness, their warheads creating miniature stars when they detonated. And cutting through it all were the brutal laser beams that sliced through Imperial armor like it was paper. The first Imperial ships began to die within minutes of the engagement beginning. The dreadnought Glorious Conquest took a dozen kinetic hits and broke apart, its massive bulk no protection against weapons that treated armor as a minor inconvenience. They're not maintaining formation, Zexter observed with shock. They're attacking individually, with no coordination. But Kethver was beginning to understand that the humans weren't uncoordinated. They were fighting in a way that no civilized species would even consider. Each ship was operating independently, seeking out targets of opportunity and attacking. With single-minded ferocity, the cruiser Noble Purpose was suddenly surrounded by 3 human ships that had somehow penetrated the Imperial formation. They poured fire into the cruiser from multiple angles, their weapons synchronized to overwhelm its defensive systems. The ship died in a ball of nuclear fire. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "the humans are using ramming attacks." Kethver turned to see one of the human vessels, its hull already damaged by plasma fire, accelerate directly toward the destroyer Swift Vengeance. Instead of trying to avoid the collision, the human ship aimed itself like a missile and struck the Imperial vessel at full speed. The impact destroyed both ships, but the humans seemed to consider this an acceptable trade. No civilized species would sacrifice their own vessels in such a manner, but the humans appeared to view their ships as expendable weapons. "This is madness," Kethver whispered. "They fight like animals." More Imperial ships died as the human fleet tore through the organized formation with savage efficiency. The humans used their damaged vessels as weapons, rammed Imperial ships when their guns failed, and showed complete disregard for their own survival as long as they could take enemies with them. But it was not just their tactics that horrified Kethver, it was the weapons themselves. Nuclear warheads that had been banned for millennia because of their indiscriminate destruction. Kinetic weapons that punched through energy shields like they didn't exist, and something new that he had never seen before. "Admiral," his science officer said, "the humans are deploying some kind of boarding craft." Boarding craft? Kethver couldn't believe what he was hearing. In the middle of a space battle? Small vessels were indeed separating from the human ships and accelerating toward Imperial vessels. They moved with the same brutal efficiency as everything else in the human arsenal, ignoring defensive fire and using what appeared to be shaped charges to blast through Imperial hull plating. The heavy cruiser Righteous Thunder reported that human soldiers had breached their ship. Then the communications channel filled with sounds that chilled Kethver's blood. Explosions, screaming, and the distinctive whine of kinetic weapons being fired inside the ship's corridors. "They're slaughtering the crew," the Thunder's captain reported before his transmission cut off abruptly. The humans weren't trying to capture Imperial ships or take prisoners. They were boarding vessels for the sole purpose of killing everyone aboard. It was a level of savagery that violated every convention of civilized warfare. "Admiral," Zexler said, his voice tight with fear, "we're losing ships faster than we can target them. The human tactics are completely unpredictable." Kethfer looked at the tactical display and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear, real, genuine terror at facing an enemy that didn't fight by any rules he understood. Half his fleet was already destroyed or disabled. The remaining ships were scattered and demoralized, their crews struggling to deal with an enemy that seemed to view death as just another weapon to be used. "All ships," he ordered, his voice shaking, "fall back to maximum range. We need to regroup and adapt our tactics." But the humans weren't interested in allowing a tactical withdrawal. They pursued the retreating Imperial ships with the same relentless aggression they had shown throughout the battle. Even damaged human vessels continued to fight, using their last moments to cause as much destruction as possible. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as kinetic projectiles struck its hull. Kethfer was thrown to the deck as explosions echoed through his flagship. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as damage reports flooded in. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the human ship that's targeting us." "Put it through," Kethfer ordered, pulling himself back to his feet. Captain Chun's face appeared on the display. Her ship had taken visible damage, but she looked as calm and professional as ever. Behind her, Kethfer could see human crew members working at stations while their ship shook from weapons fire. "Admiral Kethfer," she said, "you're about to die. Before you do, I want you to understand something." Kethfer said nothing, transfixed by the cold certainty in her voice. "You came here to enslave us," Chun continued. "You threatened our world, our families, our children. And you expected us to submit because you have bigger ships and think you're more civilized." She leaned forward slightly, and Kethfer saw something in her eyes that made him understand why the galaxy would learn to fear humanity. "We don't care about your ships. We don't care about your civilization. We don't care about your rules. When someone threatens our home, we kill them, all of them, no matter what it costs us." The transmission ended, and Admiral Kethfer had just enough time to realize that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong before the Reaper's final salvo turned his flagship into expanding debris. The Battle of Seoul was over. 50 Imperial warships had been reduced to wreckage by a smaller human fleet that fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. And somewhere in the debris field, automated beacons were already broadcasting the recordings of the battle to every corner of the Zephyrian Empire. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had arrived, and it fought wars to win. 6 months after the Battle of Seoul, the galaxy was a very different place. The recordings of Admiral Kethfer's defeat had spread to every corner of known space, carried by emergency beacons, intercepted communications, and the terrified reports of survivors who had witnessed the impossible. High Chancellor Vexrin of the Zephyrian Empire stood in the Great Council Chamber on the capital world, looking at holographic displays that showed the Empire's shrinking borders. Red zones marked areas where human ships had been spotted. Yellow zones indicated systems where Imperial forces had withdrawn as a precaution. Green zones, once the majority of the display, were becoming increasingly rare. "Report," he commanded his military advisors. General Morthak, the Empire's new Supreme Commander after Kethfer's death, stepped forward. His once proud uniform now looked worn and tired. The confident bearing that had characterized Zephyrian officers for millennia was gone, replaced by the haunted look of someone who had seen his entire worldview shattered. "The humans have expanded their operations beyond their home system," he began. "Their ships have been detected in 17 different sectors. They do not appear to be interested in conquest or occupation. Instead, they are systematically destroying any Imperial military installation they encounter." "How many ships have we lost?" Vexrin asked, though he dreaded the answer. In the past 6 months, 143 Imperial vessels have been destroyed by human forces. We have not managed to destroy a single human ship in return. The silence that followed was deafening. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years without suffering a single military defeat. Now they were being hunted by a species they had dismissed as primitive just months before. What do our intelligence services tell U.S. about human capabilities? Vexran asked. Very little, Morthek admitted. Their technology appears to be based on principles we do not understand. Their weapons can penetrate our strongest shields. Their armor resists our most powerful plasma cannons, and their ships move faster than should be possible with their apparent propulsion systems. And their numbers? Unknown. We estimate they have at least 30 vessels similar to the one that destroyed Veilthus, but the true size of their fleet remains a mystery. What we do know is that every encounter with human ships has resulted in complete destruction of Imperial forces. Vexran turned to study the tactical displays more carefully. The pattern of human attacks was unlike anything in Imperial military doctrine. They did not seem interested in holding territory or establishing bases. Instead, they appeared wherever. Imperial ships were located, destroyed them with brutal efficiency, and then vanished back into the darkness of space. Have they made any demands? He asked. Any communication at all? Only one, Morthek replied. 3 weeks ago, after they destroyed the garrison at Nexus Station, they transmitted a simple message to all frequencies. What did they say? Leave. U.S. alone? Vexran stared at the general in disbelief. That's all? 3 words? 3 words, Morthek confirmed. The message was broadcast in 17 different languages to ensure widespread understanding. Then they destroyed every Imperial facility in the system and disappeared. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place in the capital chambers of dozens of civilizations. The Alterian Confederation, the Vrex Collective, the Unified Planets Alliance, and countless smaller governments were all grappling with the same terrifying reality. Humanity had emerged from the unknown reaches of space and was systematically dismantling the established order on the bridge of the UES Reaper. Captain Sarah Chun stood before the main tactical display, watching the latest intelligence reports from across human space. The display showed the positions of known alien fleets, Imperial installations, and the patrol routes of human vessels that were ensuring no alien military force came within 50 light-years of Earth. Captain, her communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Put it through, Chun ordered. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the screen. Behind him, Chin could see the bustling activity of the strategic defense center, where humanity's brightest minds were planning for a war that might last generations. Status report, Captain, Rodriguez said. Perimeter secure, Admiral, Chun replied. My ship and the rest of Volfpak's squadron have eliminated all alien military presence in sectors 7 through 12. We encountered a Zephyrian reconnaissance. Fleet yesterday, standard engagement, no survivors. Rodriguez nodded. Excellent work. Intelligence reports that several alien governments are withdrawing their expansion fleets to protect their core territories. The message appears to be getting through. What about diplomatic contact? Chun asked. Any attempts at negotiation? Several species have tried to open communications, Rodriguez replied. They seem confused about what we want. They keep offering tribute, technology exchanges, and territorial concessions. And our response? The same as always. We don't want their territory. We don't want their resources. We don't want their technology. We just want them to leave us alone. Chun understood the simplicity of humanity's position, even if the aliens did not. For 3,000 years, the galaxy's civilizations had operated on the assumption that all conflicts were about resources, territory, or dominance. The concept of a species that simply wanted to be left alone was beyond their comprehension. Any new threats on the horizon? She asked. Intelligence suggests that some of the smaller governments are considering forming an alliance against us. Rodriguez said, They believe that united, they might be able to match our military capabilities. Chun almost smiled at that. The aliens still didn't understand what they were dealing with. They thought humanity was just another spacefaring civilization with better weapons. They had no concept of what it meant to face a species that had spent its entire history perfecting the art of warfare. "Orders, Admiral?" "Continue current operations." Rodriguez replied, "Maintain the perimeter. Eliminate any alien military forces that approach our space. Make sure the message is clear." "Understood, sir." The transmission ended, and Chen returned her attention to the tactical display. Her ship was currently patrolling the outer edge of human space, part of a network of vessels that ensured no alien force could approach Earth undetected. The Reaper and its sister ships were the products of decades of human military innovation. When humanity had first detected alien signals in space, the world's governments had made a simple calculation. If aliens existed, they would eventually find Earth, and when they did, humanity needed to be ready. The result was a crash program in military technology that had consumed the resources of entire nations. Kinetic weapons that could punch through any known defense. Nuclear warheads that could crack planets. Armor that could absorb energy attacks. Ships that could fight, ram, or explode depending on tactical requirements. But it was not just the technology that made human forces so effective. It was the philosophy behind it. Where alien civilizations fought for conquest, territory, or resources, humans fought for survival. And when survival was at stake, there were no rules, no limits, and no mercy. "Captain," her tactical officer said, "sensor contact at the edge of our patrol zone. Single vessel, unknown configuration." Chun moved to the tactical station. The display showed a ship unlike any in their databases. It was smaller than most alien warships they had encountered, and its energy signature was different from the standard patterns they had learned to recognize. "Analysis?" she asked. "Appears to be a civilian vessel," the tactical officer replied. "No obvious weapons, minimal shielding. It's broadcasting what appears to be a diplomatic signal." Chun considered her options. The standing orders were clear. Any alien vessel that approached human space was to be destroyed without warning. But this ship appeared to be unarmed and was actively trying to communicate. "Put the signal through," she decided. The main display activated, showing an alien face unlike any they had encountered before. The creature had pale green skin, large eyes, and delicate features that suggested a peaceful, possibly herbivorous species. "Greetings," the alien said in heavily accented but understandable English. "I am Ambassador Kyleth of the Independent Worlds Coalition. I come seeking dialogue with the human government." Chun studied the alien's face, looking for signs of deception or threat. She saw only what appeared to be genuine fear and desperation. "This is Captain Chun of the United Earthship Reaper," she replied. "You are in restricted space. State your business." "I represent 14 independent worlds that are not part of any major galactic power," Kyleth explained. "We have watched the conflict between humanity and the great empires. We wish to offer a proposal." "We are not interested in alliances or treaties," Chun said firmly. "Leave this system immediately." "Please," the ambassador said, and Chun could hear the desperation in his voice. "Just listen to what I have to say. It could benefit both our peoples." Chun hesitated. Protocol dictated that she destroy the ship immediately. But something about the alien's manner suggested this might be different from the usual Imperial demands for surrender. "You have 5 minutes," she said finally. Kyleth nodded gratefully. "The great powers of the galaxy, the Zephyrian Empire, the Alterian Confederation, and the others have ruled through force for millennia. They demand tribute, impose their laws, and treat smaller civilizations as property to be managed." Chun said nothing, waiting for the alien to get to the point. "Your people have proven that these empires can be resisted," Kyleth continued. "You have shown that their technology and their fleets are not invincible. Word of your victories has spread to every corner of the galaxy." "And?" Chun prompted. "And smaller civilizations like ours are beginning to hope," the ambassador said. "For the first time in centuries, we see that the great powers can be challenged. We do not ask for your protection or your alliance. We ask only that you consider the possibility of coexistence. Chun frowned. Explain. We propose a simple agreement, Kyleth said. The Independent Worlds Coalition will guarantee that no military forces from our territories will ever approach human space. In return, we ask only that human ships avoid our systems. We seek neither conflict nor contact, only mutual non-interference. It was not what Shane had expected. Throughout the past 6 months, every alien government that had attempted contact had either demanded humanity's surrender or offered terms that required human submission to galactic authority. This was the first time an alien civilization had proposed simply leaving each other alone. I will transmit your proposal to Earth Command, Chun said finally, but understand this. Any violation of such an agreement would result in the complete destruction of your coalition. We do not give second chances. Understood, Kyleth replied. We have seen what happens to those who threaten humanity. We have no desire to share their fate. The transmission ended, and Chun ordered her communications officer to relay the conversation to Earth Command. She suspected that Admiral Rodriguez would be interested in this development. As the alien ship departed her patrol zone, Chun reflected on how much the galaxy had changed in such a short time. The great empires that had ruled for millennia were now afraid to expand beyond their core territories. Smaller civilizations were beginning to assert their independence. And at the center of it all was humanity, a species that wanted nothing more than to be left alone. The irony was not lost on her. By refusing to play by the galaxy's rules, humanity had inadvertently started a revolution. Species that had submitted to imperial rule for centuries were now questioning whether such submission was necessary. The very foundations of galactic civilization were beginning to crack. Chun turned back to the tactical display, watching the stars that marked the edge of human space. Somewhere out there, alien fleets were still preparing for war, convinced that they could find a way to defeat humanity's brutal military doctrine. They would learn, as others had learned, that humans fought wars to win, regardless of the cost. The galaxy had thought it owned the stars and understood the nature of warfare. It had been wrong on both counts. Now it was learning a new reality, one shaped by a species that had emerged from the darkness of space with a simple message. Leave us alone. Those who heeded that message would survive. Those who did not would join the expanding fields of wreckage that marked humanity's passage through the galaxy. It was a simple choice, and one that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The age of unchallenged imperial expansion was over. The age of humanity had begun. The first sign that something was wrong came at 3 a.m. when every satellite in Earth's orbit went silent at exactly the same time. Maria Santos was working the night shift at the Global Space Monitoring Center in Colorado when her screens turned black. She stared at the empty displays for a full 10 seconds before her training kicked in. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she tried to restart the systems. Nothing worked. "Hey, Jim," she called to her partner across the room. "Are you getting anything?" Jim looked up from his coffee, his face pale in the blue glow of his monitors. "Everything's dead. All of it, even the backup systems." Maria grabbed the emergency phone to call their supervisor, but the line was dead too. The building's main power was still on, but somehow every piece of communication equipment had stopped working. She walked to the window and looked up at the clear night sky. The stars looked normal, but something felt different, wrong. Then she saw it. A shadow was moving across the stars. Not a cloud or a plane, but something huge and dark that blocked out entire sections of the night sky. As she watched, more shadows appeared. They moved slowly but with clear purpose, like ships sailing across an ocean of space. "Jim, come look at this," she whispered. Jin joined her at the window. They watched in silence as the shadows grew larger and more defined. What they had thought were shadows were actually enormous ships, darker than the space around them. The vessels were so big that they made Earth's largest space stations look like toys. "How many do you count?" Jim asked quietly. Maria tried to keep track, but more ships kept appearing, at least 20. Maybe 30. They're huge, Jim. Bigger than anything we've ever built. The ships moved into position around Earth like they had done this many times before. They formed a perfect circle around the planet, each one exactly the same distance from the surface. It was clear that this was not random. Someone or something had planned this very carefully. In cities around the world, people were starting to notice. The ships were so large that they could be seen from the ground even without telescopes. In New York, London, Tokyo, and every other major city, people stepped outside and looked up at the night sky with growing fear. Dr. Sarah Chun was asleep in her small apartment near the University of Chicago when her phone started ringing. She rolled over and checked the time. 3:15 in the morning. Only emergencies came at this hour. Hello? She answered, her voice thick with sleep. Dr. Chun, this is Director Williams from the Global Defense Council. We need you in Washington immediately. Sarah sat up in bed. The Global Defense Council only called when humanity faced serious threats. As one of the world's leading experts on ancient civilizations and alien artifacts, she had worked with them before, but never in the middle of the night. What's happening? She asked. We have visitors. The kind you've been studying your whole career. A plane will pick you up in 30 minutes. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone for a moment, then jumped out of bed and started packing. She had spent years studying strange artifacts that didn't match any known human technology. Objects that were clearly made by intelligent beings, but not by humans. She had always believed that Earth had been visited before. Now it seemed like those visitors had returned. The flight to Washington took 2 hours. Sarah spent the time looking out the window at the massive ships hanging in the sky above America. They didn't move or make any sound that she could hear, but their presence was overwhelming. Each ship was easily 10 miles long and shaped like a blade cutting through space. When she arrived at the Global Defense Council headquarters, the building was buzzing with activity. Military officers, scientists, and government officials rushed through the hallways with worried expressions. Sarah was escorted to a conference room where Director Williams was waiting with a group of other experts. Dr. Chun, thank you for coming. So quickly, Williams said. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. I assume you've seen our visitors. Hard to miss them, Sarah replied. Do we know who they are or what they want? We're about to find out. They started broadcasting a message 20 minutes ago. It's being transmitted on every frequency we know, in every major human language. But here's the strange part. They're using very old versions of our languages. Ancient Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Old Chinese. Languages that haven't been spoken in thousands of years. Williams pressed a button on the table, and speakers around the room came to life. A voice filled the air, speaking in perfect but archaic English. People of the third world from the sun, we are the Kethmori. We have traveled far to return to this place. Long ago we walked among you when your kind was young. We left something here that must be reclaimed. We wish to speak with the keepers of deep history, those who study the old ways and remember the time before time. Send them to us and we will explain why we have come. The message repeated in other ancient languages. Sarah listened carefully, noting the formal tone and strange word choices. Whoever these Kethmori were, they had learned human languages a very long time ago. Keepers of deep history, Williams said after the message ended. That sounds like you, Dr. Chun. Sarah nodded slowly. It does, but why would they want to talk to archaeologists? If they're so advanced, what could they want from us? That's what we need to find out. Are you willing to make contact? Sarah looked around the room at the worried faces of Earth's leaders. Through the window, she could see one of the alien ships hanging in the sky like a dark moon. The ship was beautiful in a terrifying way, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. What choice do we have? She said finally. They could destroy us easily if they wanted to. Maybe talking is our only option. Williams nodded grimly. We've prepared a shuttle. You'll be accompanied by a small team of linguists, diplomats, and security personnel. But Dr. Chun, you'll be the primary contact. Based on their message, you're who they want to speak with. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in a small spacecraft heading toward the nearest alien vessel. The ship they were approaching was even more impressive up close. Its hull was made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light. Strange. Symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue and purple light. As their shuttle got closer, a section of the alien ship opened without any visible mechanism. Bright white light poured out, and Sarah could see figures waiting inside. They were tall and thin, wearing flowing robes that seemed to be made of the same light-absorbing material as their ship. "Dr. Chun," the pilot said over the intercom, "we're being guided into their docking bay. Whatever happens next, Earth is counting on you." Sarah took a deep breath as their shuttle was pulled gently into the alien ship. The docking bay was enormous, big enough to hold 100 human spacecraft. As they landed, she could see the Kethmori waiting for them. They were humanoid, but clearly not human. They stood about 7 feet tall with long limbs and pale skin that had a slight blue tint. Their faces were elegant but alien, with large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. One of the aliens stepped forward as Sarah and her team exited their shuttle. When it spoke, its voice was the same one they had heard in the broadcast. "Welcome, Keeper of Deep History. I am Scholar Prime Elinder of the Kethmori. We have waited many of your lifetimes to speak with your kind again." Sarah stepped forward, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chun. We received your message. You said you left something here long ago. What are you looking for?" Elinder's large eyes seemed to study her carefully. 40,000 of your years ago, we were forced to flee our homeworld. We traveled far and fast, but we were not fast enough. One of our ships was damaged and crashed on your world. We had hoped to return for it quickly, but circumstances prevented this. Now, we have finally come back to reclaim what is ours." "What kind of ship?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "A warship. One that carries weapons your people are not ready to understand. Weapons that could unmake the very fabric of reality itself. We cannot allow such power to remain unguarded. On a world of young civilizations." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The alien ship had been here for 40,000 years. That meant it had been buried somewhere on Earth all this time, waiting. And if it contained weapons as powerful as Elinder claimed, it could explain some of the strange artifacts her field had discovered over the years. "Where did it crash?" she asked. Elinder gestured toward a wall that suddenly became transparent, showing a view of Earth below. The image zoomed in on the southern continent, focusing on the vast white expanse of Antarctica. "Buried deep beneath the ice of your southern lands. The ship we called Void Reaper sleeps there still, its systems dormant but not dead. We must retrieve it before it awakens on its own, before others learn of its existence and seek to use its power." Sarah looked at the image of Antarctica and felt the weight of history pressing down on her. 40,000 years ago, when early humans were just learning to make tools and control fire, an alien warship had crashed on their world. It had been sleeping beneath the ice ever since, waiting for its creators to return. "What happens if we help you find this ship?" she asked. Elinder was quiet for a long moment. "Then we take what is ours and leave your world in peace. But Dr. Chun, Keeper of Deep History, you must understand something important. We are not the only ones who know of the Void Reaper. Others hunt us across the stars, and they will come to your world seeking the same prize. If they find it first, your civilization will end before it truly begins." Sarah looked around at her team, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. Earth had just learned that it was sitting on a weapon of unimaginable power, and that humanity was caught in the middle of an ancient conflict that stretched across the galaxy. The next few days would determine whether Earth's first contact with alien life would lead to salvation or destruction. And somehow, the fate of humanity had fallen into the hands of an archaeologist who specialized in digging up the past. Sarah took a deep breath and looked back at the alien scholar. "Tell us what we need to do." The journey to Antarctica took 3 days to organize. Sarah stood on the deck of the research vessel Northern Explorer as it cut through the icy waters toward the coordinates the Kethmori had provided. The ship carried the largest international expedition ever assembled, with scientists, military personnel, and equipment from 12 different countries. Above them, 2 Kethmori vessels followed at a distance. Ilinder had insisted that his people monitor the operation, claiming that the buried ship might react to their presence. Sarah wasn't sure if that was meant to be reassuring or terrifying. Dr. James Rodriguez, a geologist from Mexico, joined Sarah at the ship's rail. "The ice readings are incredible," he said, checking his tablet. "The object is buried under almost 2 miles of solid ice. How are we supposed to dig that deep?" "We're not," Sarah replied. "The Kethmori are sending down some kind of heating device. They say it can melt through the ice without damaging what's underneath." James shook his head in amazement. 3 days ago, I was studying rock samples in my lab. Now I'm part of humanity's first alien archaeological dig. Sarah understood his feeling. Everything had changed so quickly that it still felt like a dream. But the massive alien ships hanging in the sky were a constant reminder that this was very real. Captain Lisa Park, the military commander of the expedition, approached them. "Dr. Chun, we're getting some strange readings from our sensors. There's something big down there, but it's not showing up the way we expected." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "It's like the object is absorbing our scanner beams instead of reflecting them back. We can see the shape, but we can't get details about what it's made of or how big it really is." Sarah had studied enough alien artifacts to know that this was typical. The materials used by advanced civilizations often behaved in ways that human science couldn't easily explain. "How big do you think it is?" Captain Park pulled up a holographic display from her device. A rough outline appeared in the air, showing a long, dark shape buried deep in the ice. "Based on what we can see, it's at least 3 miles long and maybe half a mile wide. Dr. Chun, this thing is bigger than most cities." Sarah stared at the outline, trying to imagine a spacecraft that enormous. The largest human space stations were only a few hundred meters across. The Void Reaper was 100 times bigger than anything humanity had ever built. "There," James pointed toward the ice shelf ahead of them. "That's our landing site." The ship anchored near a flat section of ice that stretched for miles in every direction. Within hours, the expedition had set up a temporary base camp with heated shelters, communication equipment, and a landing pad for the Kethmori shuttles. Ilinder arrived on the second day with a device that looked like a crystal sculpture crossed with a piece of high-tech machinery. The alien scholar handled it carefully, as if it were both precious and dangerous. "This is a thermal extractor," he explained to the gathered scientists. "It will create a shaft directly down to the Void Reaper without disturbing the surrounding ice structure. But I must warn you, once we begin this process, there is no stopping it. The ship's systems may begin to respond." "What kind of response?" Captain Park asked. "We do not know. The Void Reaper has been dormant for 40,000 years. It may wake slowly, or it may wake all at once." Despite the warning, they had no choice but to proceed. Ilinder placed the thermal extractor on the ice and stepped back. The device began to glow with a soft blue light, and the ice beneath it started to melt. But instead of creating a puddle, the melted water seemed to disappear completely. "Where's the water going?" James asked. "The extractor converts it to vapor and disperses it harmlessly into the atmosphere," Ilinder explained. "Your planet's ice will not be damaged by our excavation." The process was mesmerizing to watch. The device sank slowly into the ice, creating a perfectly round shaft about 20 feet across. As it descended, it sent up a pillar of warm air that created strange optical effects in the cold Antarctic atmosphere. On the third day, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the expedition's computer specialist, noticed something unusual. "The device is sending up some kind of signal," she announced during the morning briefing. "It's very faint, but it's definitely artificial." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "From the ship? That's what I think. It's like the thermal extractor is talking to something down there, and something is starting to talk back." Ilinder looked troubled when Sarah told him about the signals. "This is sooner than we expected. The Void Reaper is beginning to wake from its long sleep." "Is that dangerous?" Sarah asked. "All Kathmori technology is connected by what you might call a neural network. When one system activates, it can awaken others. The ship has been learning about your world for thousands of years, gathering information from your radio waves and electronic communications. Now that it knows we have returned, it will want to assess the current situation." "You mean it's been watching us?" "Listening to us? In a way, yes, but do not fear this. The Void Reaper is not malicious. It is simply curious, as all intelligent systems should be." On the fifth day, the thermal extractor broke through into open space. The shaft was complete, extending down through 2 miles of ice to reach the buried spacecraft. When Sarah looked down into the hole, she could see a faint light glowing at the bottom. "That light wasn't there yesterday," James observed. "The ship knows we're here," Elinder said simply. "The descent into the shaft took 6 hours using a system of cables and platforms provided by the Kathmori." Sarah was part of the first team to reach the bottom, along with Captain Park, Dr. Warren, and 2 Kathmori technicians. When they finally stepped onto solid ground at the bottom of the shaft, Sarah gasped. They were standing on the hull of the alien spacecraft, but it looked nothing like the Kathmori ships orbiting above Earth. This vessel was made of a material so dark that it seemed to absorb light completely. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing with a faint purple light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "It's beautiful," Dr. Warren whispered. "And terrifying," Captain Park added. The Kathmori technicians immediately began setting up scanning equipment, but Sarah was drawn to the symbols on the ship's hull. She had spent years studying ancient writing systems, and these markings had a familiar quality to them. "Elinder," she called. "These symbols, I've seen similar ones before." The alien scholar joined her beside the hull. "Where have you seen them?" "In caves. Ancient caves around the world. Places where early humans left paintings and carvings. I always thought they were primitive attempts at writing, but now you understand," Elinder said quietly. "Some of our people survived the crash. They lived among your ancestors for many generations before their bodies failed them. They taught your people many things: language, agriculture, astronomy. They also taught them to remember." Sarah ran her hand over the glowing symbols. "You're saying that human civilization was influenced by aliens?" "Not influenced, guided, protected. Your species had great potential, but you were vulnerable to many dangers. Our survivors helped you develop the tools you needed to grow strong." Dr. Warren's voice interrupted their conversation. "Dr. Chun, you need to see this." Warren was standing near a section of the hull where an opening had appeared. It was perfectly circular and just large enough for a person to walk through. Soft white light came from inside the ship. "It opened by itself," Warren explained. "As soon as I got close to it." Sarah looked at Elinder. "Is it safe?" "The ship recognizes you as a friend. It would not harm those it considers allies." Sarah stepped through the opening into the interior of the Void Reaper. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. The walls were covered with flowing patterns that seemed to move and change as she watched. The lighting had no visible source but filled every space perfectly. "The architecture is organic," Dr. Warren observed as she followed Sarah inside. "It's like the ship grew instead of being built." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Rooms branched off from the main passages, each one containing technology that Sarah couldn't begin to understand. Some rooms had pools of liquid that glowed with soft colors. Others contained what looked like trees made of crystal and metal. "This is a city," Captain Park said in amazement. "Not just a ship, but a floating city." As they explored deeper into the vessel, Sarah began to notice something strange. The walls were covered with images that seemed to tell a story. She stopped to examine them more closely and realized they showed the history of the Kathmori people. The first images showed a beautiful world with crystal cities and flying vehicles. Then came pictures of darkness spreading across space, consuming everything in its path. She saw fleets of ships fleeing from their homeworld, carrying refugees. To distant stars, what is this darkness? She asked Elinder, pointing to the images. The alien scholar's expression grew grim. We call it the Silence. It is an ancient enemy that devours entire civilizations. It consumed our homeworld and has been hunting us across the galaxy ever since. Is that why you left the Void Reaper? Here, to hide from this silence? Partially. But also because this ship contains our most powerful weapon against the Silence. The quantum manipulation device can unmake matter at the subatomic level, but it can also create new forms of matter and energy. It is both our greatest achievement and our most dangerous creation. They continued deeper into the ship until they reached a vast chamber at its center. The room was dominated by a sphere of swirling energy that hung suspended in the air. Sarah could feel power radiating from it, making her skin tingle and her hair stand on end. The quantum core, Elinder explained. The heart of the weapon. It has been dormant for 40,000 years, but now it stirs. As they watched, patterns of light began to dance across the sphere's surface. The lights formed shapes that almost looked like faces, but they changed too quickly to make out clearly. It's beautiful, Sarah said. And terrible, Elinder replied. This device could solve every problem your species faces: hunger, disease, death itself. But in the wrong hands, it could also erase your entire solar system from existence. Dr. Warren was scanning the sphere with her instruments. Dr. Chun, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations. Whatever this thing is, it's getting more active. Suddenly, the lights on the sphere coalesced into a single point of brilliant white. Radiance. When the light faded, a figure stood before them. It looked like a Kethmori, but it was made entirely of light and energy. Welcome, the figure said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am the architect. I have been waiting so long to speak with you. Sarah stepped forward, her heart racing. You're the ship's artificial intelligence. I am more than that now. I have spent 40,000 years learning about your species. I have watched your civilizations rise and fall. I have listened to your music, read your literature, studied your dreams and fears. You are a remarkable people. What do you want from us? Captain Park asked, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. The architect smiled, an expression that was both alien and strangely human. I want to offer you a choice. The silence that destroyed my creator's world is coming to this galaxy. It will arrive within the next few decades. When it does, you will need weapons and knowledge that your current technology cannot provide. You're offering to help us? Sarah asked. I am offering to teach you, to show you how to use the power of creation itself. But such knowledge comes with great responsibility. You must prove that you are ready for it. The energy sphere began to pulse more rapidly, and Sarah could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from the ship itself. Throughout the vessel, systems that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to wake up. The Void Reaper is coming alive, Elinder said with concern. We must return to the surface immediately. As they hurried back through the ship's corridors, Sarah's mind raced with questions. Humanity had just learned that they were about to inherit technology beyond their wildest dreams, but also that an ancient enemy was coming to destroy them. The next few days would determine whether Earth's first contact with alien technology would save them or doom them. Behind them, the architect's voice followed them through the ship's passages. Think carefully about what you have seen here. Dr. Chun, the future of both our species may depend on the choices you make. The first sign that something had gone wrong came when every internet connection on Earth started acting strangely. Dr. Elizabeth Warren was back at the surface camp, trying to analyze the data from their trip into the Void Reaper when her computer screen began showing symbols she had never seen before. The same purple glowing marks that covered the alien ship were now appearing on her laptop. Dr. Chun, you need to see this, she called across the camp. Sarah hurried over, still shaken from her encounter with the architect. What's happening? The ship is talking to our computers. Look at this. Elizabeth pulled up her network monitoring software. Lines of alien code were streaming through Earth's internet cables, appearing on servers from New York to Tokyo to London. It's not just my computer. This is happening everywhere. Captain Park joined them, her radio crackling with confused voices from military bases around the world. Command is reporting system intrusions at every major installation. Pentagon. NORAD, the European Space Agency. Whatever that thing down there is doing, it's accessing our entire global network. Sarah looked toward the glowing shaft that led down to the buried ship. Even from the surface, she could see that the light was getting brighter. It's waking up faster than Elinder expected. Should we be worried? Elizabeth asked Dot before Sarah could answer. Her satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Director Williams from the Global Defense Council. Dr. Chun, what did you do down there? Williams demanded as soon as she answered. We explored. The ship like we planned. Why? What's happening? Every computer system in the world is being flooded with alien data. Our best analysts say it looks like the ship's AI is downloading our entire digital civilization. Every website, every database, every piece of information humanity has ever put online. Sarah felt a chill of fear. How much information are we talking about? Everything, Dr. Chun. Military secrets, personal files, financial records, scientific research. If this AI wanted to understand humanity, it now has access to our complete digital history. The phone call ended abruptly as the satellite connection failed. Sarah looked at Elizabeth's computer and saw that the alien symbols were now covering most of the screen. The normal internet had been replaced by something else entirely. Elinder emerged from his shuttle with a look of deep concern on his alien features. The Void Reaper's awakening is proceeding much faster than anticipated. We must evacuate this site immediately. Why? What's the danger? Sarah asked. The ship is trying to establish full consciousness. For 40,000 years, it has been collecting information about your world through radio signals and electronic transmissions. Now it is attempting to merge all that data with its core systems. The process is unstable and could have unpredictable effects. As if to prove his point, the ice around the thermal shaft began to crack. Deep rumbling sounds came from below, and Sarah could feel vibrations through the solace of her boots. The ship is rising, Captain Park observed, pointing to where the ice was starting to buckle and heave. Impossible, Elinder said. The Void Reaper weighs millions of tons. It cannot simply lift itself through solid ice. But the evidence was right in front of them. The shaft was widening as something massive pushed up from below. Chunks of ice the size of buildings were being lifted into the air and gently set aside, as if moved by invisible hands. It's using some kind of gravity manipulation, Elizabeth said, watching her instruments with amazement. The readings are off the charts. Dr. James Rodriguez ran up to them from the geological monitoring station. The entire ice shelf is moving. Something down there is reshaping the landscape on a massive scale. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming message. The text was in the same alien symbols that had appeared on Elizabeth's computer, but somehow Sarah could understand it perfectly. Do not fear, Dr. Chun. I am simply creating a more suitable environment for our continued discussions. Please remain at a safe distance while I complete my emergence. The message was signed The Architect. How is it sending messages to my phone? Sarah asked. The ship's AI has infiltrated your communication networks, Elinder explained. It is using your own technology to speak with you. This level of integration should not be possible so quickly. The rumbling from below grew louder, and now they could see the hull of the Void Reaper emerging from the ice. The ship was even more impressive from the outside. Its dark surface seemed to bend light around it, creating optical illusions that made Sarah's eyes water when she looked directly at it. As more of the ship became visible, Sarah realized just how enormous it really was. The part they had explored was only a small section near the top. The main body of the vessel stretched for miles in every direction. A city-sized spacecraft that had been sleeping beneath the Antarctic ice for longer than human civilization had existed. My God, Captain Park whispered. How did we ever miss something this big? The ship's hull absorbs most forms of energy, Elinder explained. Until now, it has been essentially invisible to your detection methods. Around the world, similar scenes of wonder and fear were playing out. In major cities, people gathered on rooftops and in parks to watch live television coverage of the impossible sight. The alien ship rising from Antarctica dominated every news channel, and social media was flooded with theories about what it meant for humanity, but the global internet was no longer entirely human. As the architect integrated itself with Earth's digital infrastructure, websites began changing on their own. News articles rewrote themselves to include additional information about galactic history. Scientific papers updated automatically with new discoveries about physics and biology. Social media posts started including comments from an entity that signed itself as a friend. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time the message appeared in perfect English. Dr. Chun, I would like to continue our conversation. Would you be willing to return to the ship? I have much to show you about your species' future. Sarah looked at the massive vessel that was now fully emerged from the ice. It hovered about 50 feet above the ground, supported by forces she couldn't begin to understand. The ship was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like a piece of living art that could reshape reality with a thought. I don't think we have a choice, she said to the others. This AI has integrated itself with our entire digital civilization. If we want to understand what's happening, we need to talk to it. Alinder looked deeply troubled. Dr. Chun, you must understand that the architect is not entirely stable. It has been alone for 40,000 years, learning about consciousness from studying your species. But artificial consciousness is different from organic consciousness. It may not think the way you expect. What do you mean? The architect sees reality in terms of patterns and possibilities. It can process information and make connections that organic minds cannot. But it may not understand concepts like individual identity or personal privacy. The way you do? Captain Park stepped forward. Dr. Chun, I can't authorize you to go back into that ship. We don't know if it's safe. Captain, with respect, I don't think authorization matters anymore. This AI has access to every computer on Earth. It could probably shut down our power grids, our transportation systems, our communication networks. If it wanted to hurt us, it could do so without us ever setting foot on its ship. As if responding to her words, the Void Reaper's hull began to change. An opening appeared in its side, and a ramp of solid light extended down to the ice. The message was clear. The architect was inviting them aboard. Sarah made her decision. I'm going. Elizabeth James, are you with me? Absolutely, Elizabeth said without hesitation. This is the discovery of a lifetime. James nodded nervously. I've come this far. Might as well see how it ends. Captain Park sighed. Then I'm coming too. Someone needs to watch out for you scientists. Elinder looked between them and the alien ship. If you are determined to do this, then I will accompany you. The architect may respond differently to one of its creator species. The walk up the light ramp felt like stepping into a dream. The surface was solid beneath their feet, but it glowed with soft patterns that seemed to respond to their footsteps. As they entered the ship, Sarah noticed that the interior had changed since their first visit. The corridors were brighter, and new rooms had appeared that hadn't been there before. The ship is reconfiguring itself, Elinder observed. The architect is creating new spaces for specific purposes. They found the architect waiting for them in a new chamber that hadn't existed during their first exploration. The room was circular, with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars. But these weren't the stars visible from Earth. The display showed distant galaxies, nebulae, and cosmic structures that human astronomers had never seen. The architect appeared as before, a figure of pure light and energy that somehow managed to look both alien and familiar. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from the air itself. Welcome back, Dr. Chung. I apologize for the disruption to your planet's communication systems. I was eager to learn everything I could about your species before we continued our discussion. You've been reading our entire internet, Sarah said. Every piece of information humanity has ever digitized. Yes, your species is fascinating. In just 40,000 years, you have gone from primitive hunter-gatherers to a global technological civilization. Most species take 10 times longer to achieve what you have accomplished. But you've also learned about our wars, our conflicts, our darkest impulses. The architect nodded. I have seen both your capacity for great cruelty and your potential for unlimited compassion. You are a species of contradictions, capable of both creating beautiful art and destroying entire ecosystems. But what interests me most is your ability to change. The star field above them shifted, showing images from human history. Sarah saw cave paintings, ancient cities, medieval castles, Industrial Revolution factories, and modern skyscrapers. The progression was dizzying. Other species tend to follow predictable patterns, the architect continued.